Welcome back to Recaps Kingdom. Today I'm going to explain 2016 action comedy film titled Central Intelligence. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and enjoy. Movie opens in 1996. A Central High School student, Robbie Weirdick, is in the locker room shower, dancing and lip-syncing to song. A group of high school bullies, led by Trevor Olson, come in and mock Robbie since he is overweight and dorky. Meanwhile, a school assembly goes on, with the whole senior class honoring its most popular student, Calvin Joyner, aka the Golden Jet. Trevor and his goons carry Robbie into the gym and slide him across the floor butt naked. Everyone laughs at Robbie, except for Calvin and Maggie. Calvin gives him his jacket to cover himself up. Robbie runs out of the gym, utterly humiliated. Now 20 years has passed. Calvin works as accountant, that he hates. His former assistant just got promoted above him. Calvin is married to his high school love interest Maggie, but their marriage hasn't been going well. Their high school reunion is coming up, and Calvin fears that he's peaked in high school and his life has just gone downhill. At work, Calvin goes on Facebook. He receives a friend request from someone named Bob Stone. He is confused but still accepts it. Immediately after that, he gets a suspicious phone call, but it turns out to be Maggie. Then Bob Stone invites Calvin for a drink, at night. But Calvin doesn't know him. He claims he is really Robbie Weirdick from high school. Calvin left shocked, and hesitantly accepts the invitation. Calvin walks to the bar, and approached by Muscular guy. He reveals himself to be Bob Stone. Calvin is surprised to find that Robbie has completely transformed into a muscular guy. They too have drinks and catch up. As Bob leaves for a moment, a man walks by and takes Bob's chair. Calvin tells that guy to give it back, but the guy's friends stand up menacingly. Bob returns, and tells them to apologize for disrespecting Calvin. One of the goons happens to have a gun with him. Bob takes his shot and simply says, "I don't like bullies," before kicking all their asses in less than 10 seconds. Calvin and Bob leave the bar, with Calvin excited over what he just watched. Bob decided to roll to their old high school, to stroll down memory lane. Bob walks through the boys' locker room, and is brought back to the worst day of his life. Calvin comforts him, and pulls him away from there. They see the trophy case, with all of Calvin's accomplishments, along with a picture of a girl named Darla McGuckian, whom Bob had a crush on, and was noted for having 2 lazy eyes. Bob convinced Calvin to do his famous backflip, aka the Golden Jet's backflip. However, it goes extremely wrong. Then they two walk back to Calvin's house. Before they part ways, Bob mentions needing Calvin's help, regarding something in Calvin's line of work. Calvin agrees, but doesn't realize what Bob means. Bob goes into his house to use the computer. They come across files involving satellite codes, a bidding war and millions of dollars, all around the world. Unfortunately, before they can see more, Bob spills beer on Calvin's laptop. Then Bob asks if he can stay the night here. Calvin reluctantly allows him to do so. In the morning, Calvin walks into a lounge. It was totally destroyed. He hears the knocks at the door and goes to see who it is. A group of CIA agents led by Pamela Harris are looking for Bob. Calvin says he's on the couch, and the agents head in. But Bob is nowhere to be found. Harris explains to Calvin that Bob is wanted for murder and conspiracy to commit treason. Now Calvin's floored. The stranger from high school has now wrapped him up in something serious. Agent Harris tells him to prove he's not aligned with Bob Stone, and he says he'll need some time. So agents follow Calvin to work, in case if he make any contact with Bob. Sure enough, Bob also calls Calvin and says he is somewhere in his building. Harris leads the agents to that specific floor, but Bob is really hiding in Calvin's office room. Bob reveals he is in CIA, and that the people that want the satellite codes are willing to kill for them. Bob calls for an Uber to pick them up, which will be there in 6 minutes. He times his next moves accordingly. Bob takes Calvin's tie and wraps it around the sprinkler on the floor. He then lights it on fire, before Calvin runs outside to alert everyone of Bob's presence. A war in the office starts between agents and Bob. Bob takes on all the agents, with virtually no issues. But one of the agents wraps a cord around his neck. Bob asks Calvin for help, who has just picked up a gun, and shoot randomly at the guy strangling Bob, releasing him. Now Bob and Calvin are then cornered by Harris and the other agents. At the right moment, the sprinklers go off, giving Bob the chance to wheel Calvin away in a mail cart, and burst out of a window. They land on the company's inflatable balloons, and ride away in the Uber. Bob takes Calvin to his safe spot, and remove the GPS from the car. Bob tells Calvin about how he's been set up. Since his partner Phil was trapped in an L because he's the only person he can trust. They too are attacked by a guy on motorcycle. Bob knocks the guy off, by throwing a metal pipe into the wheels. Calvin decide the bike will be great escape for him. He take the bike and ditch Bob. He calls Maggie and tells her not to go home, and they can meet at the therapist's office. As he walks away, Harris pulls up in a van and makes Calvin get in. She says Bob is dangerous, because Bob is the Black Badger. And flips his story around, Bob happily betrayed his partner Phil. She tell him that the only way Bob sells the code, is with the Calvin's help, and because he's the only person Bob trusts. She gives Calvin a device with a button to push, which will alert them to Bob's presence. Now Calvin meets Maggie at the office of a marriage counselor, named Dr. Dan, who is really Bob. They have a session in which Calvin is made to look like a bad guy, who is hurting his and Maggie's relationship. After Maggie leaves, Calvin threatens Bob with calling Harris. Bob knows he wouldn't do that, and convince Calvin to help him, promising that he's on the right side. Then two of them go to the office of someone that can help them to get the transaction number. Unfortunately for Bob, this person is Trevor, who bullies him. After Trevor gets them what they need, Trevor brings up the incident that has traumatized Bob. Trevor claims to have found religion and he delivers a heartfelt apology to Bob, which he quickly takes back as he was faking. He's still a dick that thinks little of Bob. Calvin waits for Bob to kick his ass too. But Bob is still unconfident, he freezes up and decides to leave. But at last Trevor gives them the transaction number. As they leave the office, Calvin gets a call from Harris saying that he needs to deliver Bob to them, or Maggie would be in a great trouble. Calvin then meets Bob outside. Bob says Calvin was always his only friend, which makes it harder on both of them. Calvin drops a bomb by apologizing, and revealing that he told Harris about where they are. Then the agents arrive, and takes both of them. Bob and Calvin are detained at the CIA headquarters. The agents start to torture Bob, to get information out of him, by breaking one of his fingers. Filled with regret, Calvin decided to fight back and rescues Bob. He knocks out an agent, takes the gun and pulls it on the others demanding a key card. He ties him up, and goes to get Bob. He walks into another room, and Bob immediately lights up before putting Agent Harris in cuffs. She tells him he's making a mistake, but he argues only if he's wrong. Outside, Calvin apologizes to Bob for what he did, deciding he still wants to help him. Bob forgives him and proceeds to give him a high five, only to see his messed up finger. He pops it back into place. And as they're about to escape, Calvin tries to use the key card, but it doesn't work. An agent holds a gun to his head, but Bob saves the day and rams the guy. Now they escape and grab a car, after Bob destroys the other car and they drive away. Bob tells him to take the code and put them into a map, to find the location where the bad guys want to buy the satellite codes. Their destination is Boston, which means they need a plane. So they go to the airport, and Bob informs him that they need to steal a plane. Now Calvin distracts the security guard's attention, and Bob actually pulls the plane from the hangar. They fly a plane to the spot, and while flying, Calvin thinks Agent Harris is the Black Badger. But Bob informs that the plane is running out of gas. They head in for a crash landing. Calvin expressed that his regret of not being a father. Bob then pulls the plane back up, having faked the situation to get Calvin to express his fears under extreme stress. Now they arrive at their destination. But they don't feel right. Calvin thinks it's too exposed. Then he spots a parking garage and tells Bob it's happening below. Bob tells Calvin, "I'll see you on the other side," which is the same thing he told Phil before his death. And Bob heads into the parking lot, alone. Outside, Calvin spots Harris showing up at the location, leading him to think she's Black Badger. Calvin enters the buy spot to find Bob making the deal with the buyer. Shockingly, Bob shoots at Calvin, but it just grazes his neck. As he's about to give the buyer the package, the real Black Badger emerges to make a deal, but it's Phil, claiming he has the real satellite codes. Phil reveals he's the real Black Badger. Bob says he's lying. At the same time, Harris and her agents arrive and start shooting at the buyer and his goons. Calvin sees the drives on the ground. Against his better judgment, he runs out and grabs it, and runs off. He gets chased by the buyer and he's about to be hit by the car, but Bob saves him again. Now they three all find themselves over a small bridge. They too try to convince Calvin that they're innocent. And suddenly they start shooting at each other. Now Calvin has a gun in his hands, and he aims it at both Bob and Phil. He shoots Bob in the leg, but he holds the gun on Phil. But then he realized the ammunition is out. Phil says he faked his own death, and set Bob up simply, because he was just annoyed with Bob as his partner, always being a dork and going on about how Calvin was his hero. Before Phil can kill Calvin, he attempts his Golden Jets flip, it goes wrong again. But it was just a distraction. Suddenly Bob literally rips out Phil's throat and pushes him into the river. Bob apologizes to Calvin for shooting him, saying he needed to make it look convincing. The guys hand over the codes to Harris, who thanks them for their help. With Bob's name cleared, Harris has them taken to the reunion in a chopper. The two arrive and meet Maggie. Calvin promises to make things better between them. Now Calvin, Bob and Maggie enters the reunion. A new promo king is announced, and it's Bob. Calvin tells Maggie that he hacked into the school's voting system and gave him the honor. Trevor and his buddies go up to make fun of Bob, but he won't have any of it, and he gives Trevor a punch that he's had coming for 20 years. Bob goes on stage and gives a speech stating that he's come to accept who he is and acknowledging Calvin as his friend. Then he proceeds to take his clothes off, no longer ashamed of himself. The others cheer him on. Bob is then approached by his high school crush Darla McGuckian. He takes off her glasses, claiming she is beautiful as she is. Bob and Calvin goes on to dance. Months later, Maggie is pregnant with her and Calvin's first kid. Bob arrives to pick Calvin up to hang out. He gives Calvin back his jacket, that he gave him 20 years earlier. The two then head off, and the movie completes here. Thanks for watching.